You wrote a statement on October 9th. I was hoping to read it, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Our Palestinian casualties are always your footnotes. The daily humiliation of occupation ignored. The aggression by settlers and soldiers alike on holy sites and souls. The annihilation of entire families that follows. The devastation of whatever scraps remain in the open-air prison of Gaza. Unsustainable and inhumane. So if you're waking up to a sudden interest in the region and want to know what's been happening, dig a bit deeper than 2 weeks and try to read beyond the headlines of a media that has been dehumanizing us for decades.
Again, this was not surprising. This was very predictable. If you've been watching what's been unfolding before October 7th, 2021, Human Rights Watch puts out the report, Threshold Reached. Israel is an apartheid state. Amnesty International 2022, The Crime of Apartheid, showing how all of the legal determinations of apartheid have been reached. The occupation is only getting more aggressive. Shireen Abu Akleh, a Palestinian-American journalist, is shot dead in 2022 in front of the world. The United States says initially that if it is shown that Israel was complicit or that Israel carried out the execution, then there will be consequences. Of course, once it was shown that Israel was indeed responsible for the bullet that killed Shireen Abu Akleh, the United States did absolutely nothing. Shireen's funeral was attacked. The pallbearers were beaten. Her casket almost fell. And again, the world is watching. The aggression against worshippers in Al-Aqsa is getting worse. You have the flag march, the Jerusalem flag march, where extremist settlers are let loose and wild on Palestinians by the thousands, chanting things like Muhammad is dead, we're going to murder you Arabs, all with the protection of the state with Israeli soldiers. And throughout this time, it's like something bad is going to happen. And then 2023 comes along. You had 13,000 settler units in 2023, a plan of 13,000 settler units, the most in the history of the occupation, the most racist and extremist government, Israeli government that you have ever had. And people don't realize that in 2023 alone, over 600 Palestinians had already been killed. It just doesn't make Western headlines. And so if you wonder why the American public sees this so much differently than the rest of the world, it's because American media shows the American public something so much different than what the rest of the world is shown. And so this was a pressure cooker. This was going to explode. It is extremely predictable. You've given people absolutely no hope. And so I think that as we're watching that, it's important for us to actually interrogate the ignorance that people have of the Palestinian plight, the ignorance of the root causes of this violence, the ignorance of the occupation. And also ask yourselves, why is it that Israel can violate every single international law on the books, have all these determinations, and the United States keeps on issuing these inconsequential statements while also at the same time funding these aggressions? So it's like, stop the settler violence. The United States will issue statement after statement. Stop the settler violence. Stop the incursions on Masjid al-Aqsa. Stop violating the people in Jerusalem. Stop trying to wipe out the Palestinian people. Stop openly saying, that there is no two-state solution, that we will never allow a Palestinian state to be established. But at the same time, here's your $3 billion check. And if the United Nations issues any sort of resolution against Israel, or if any international body tries to hold Israel accountable, the United States stands in the way of any accountability. It's important for us to ask why. And so I always tell people, read beyond the headlines. Even now, with the backdrop of a genocide, over 30,000 people have been killed. If you open the front page of most American mainstream sites, you will see stories about the hostages, the Israeli hostages. You will see stories about October 7th, but October 8th is missing, October 9th is missing, October 10th is missing. 100 days of genocide are missing. And you'll barely have a story that shows up every once in a while that, is still very much so controlled by the Israeli propaganda machine, because while Israel kills Palestinian journalists, it also makes sure that American journalists are only able to tell a certain story. They're only able to see Gaza from a certain perspective. They're only able to speak about Gaza from a certain perspective. And this is well documented. that they have to review their media tapes with Israel before they can publicize them. And so this is state propaganda at this point. The mainstream media and the United States government are in lockstep telling a very skewed story. And that is leading to a greater sense of frustration. And I think the American public has been wronged as well by not knowing what's happening.